Is up, my YouTube family? My name is Josiah, and I'm here to just chat with you about Backdoor. And this is going to be a walkthrough. It might seem a little bit longer just because what my goal of these walkthroughs is not to just punch in commands like a code monkey, but to actually understand the why and to help you as an aspiring pen tester, CTF, or whatever your security and kind of infosec goals are. We want to make sure that you have all the skills and tools and understand every aspect of this so that you can make this replicable. You don't want to just be able to type in the commands and run them, but you want to understand why you went that direction and what other tools are available, etc. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Every good CTF probably starts with Nmap. That's not a hard rule by any stretch, but every single CTF I've ever done, I'm trying to think if there's any that haven't started that way, and I think they all do. So it's a pretty good bet to just go ahead, make an Nmap directory, and just run, the standard IPsec, dash sc dash sv dash oa full. So I'll show you that here. So we're just going to say dash sc dash v dash oa, and and then 10.10.11.125, which coincidentally, if you haven't already, go ahead and start your backdoor machine, and get that IP going, and you'll be all set there. So what is this command doing? So dash sc, all scripts, dash sv, standard ports, and dash oa, output to all formats. And so then you've got your IP here, and what that should give you is this. So cat full.nmap, because that's what we named, and it should give you a couple of ports here, right? So already we're behind, and you don't know this because you haven't walked through this box, but it's really important to do proper enumeration the entire way. And the only way to actually perform that, or the only way to actually do that, is to keep figuring out, different ways to Nmap the device. And so I know that sounds kind of vague and counterintuitive. What I like to do is kind of have a preconceived idea. So this is my note-taking system. It's just in Notion. And basically what this is here, this critical enumeration, is I make all of my directories ahead of time. I'm going to run auto recon in the background. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then I've got a bunch of different Nmap scans that I like to run. And so you see dash sv there, but without, ping. You've got, all ports, maybe even finding the operating system, and UDP quick scan. And that basically gives me a lot of really good context as to the box. If 22 is on one scan and not on the others, it might have been, an anomaly. Or if all the scans don't find any UDP ports, if I'm scanning a bunch of different ways, maybe it just doesn't have these UDP ports open, right? So there's no sure way to know that your scans are catching all the ports, but more scans are better because you have a lot more context about the box. So that's what I did, right? I cat all ports for Nmap. We'll just do the Nmap one. And what that found was 1337, which is waste, right? So again, making sure that you're doing proper scanning and enumeration, your first scan might not hit them all. And so really wise to just think about that. So now we've got these three ports here. Let's talk about note taking a little bit. So like I said, I use Notion. This is just what I do. I kind of keep my life in this tool. And so I have a little template that I created. If you're interested, I'd be happy to share it with you. Just go ahead and make a comment or you can find me, my contact information on the walkthrough that I'm about to send in the comment section as well. But basically, what I like to do is just start, filling this out. And so services, you got SSH, you've got 80, which would be HTTP, and waste question mark. And then what other versions, right? So you're just filling this out. You're trying to get more context about the box. You're trying to make sure that you understand what various service versions are out there and all that good stuff, right? So I'm not going to fill out this entire sheet and all of that, but I think you get the idea. You get the version number. And then what I like to do, honestly, is just throw a bunch of commands into this. And so this has a side peek view. And, if I'm doing a port here, it'll give me, a common Google version. So if 22 has an interesting service version, right? So I'm going to go in here and let's say it's 2.1. That's kind of interesting, right? Because I commonly see 8 and all of those out in the field. So then I think, okay, well, let's Google SSH one, maybe with GitHub, maybe with the tag version, and then run a brute force run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you get the idea. Your note taking is very, very crucial to the success of your pen test. And without proper note taking, you don't really understand where you've been and where you're going because it just gets so spread out, right? And I'm sure you've noticed that before. Some people use cherry trees, some people use other things. So I'm off my soapbox. Just wanted to let you know that's what I use, and this is what's really helpful for me. Another thing to think about now is what tools you can run in the background while you're doing initial enumeration. So typically the methodology that I follow is let's look at all the ports within map and determine which ports are the most likely. And then I'll spend 5 to 10 minutes just generally interrogating those ports to understand, okay, this could be a vector, this could not be a vector, right? If you see HTTP on 7 different ports, which could happen, right? 5985, 47001, et cetera, after all of your nmap scans, and you're moving through that in a relatively methodical way, you're able to kind of interrogate each port equally. So 80 might not be the vector, but 5985 might be, or 47001. And so only concentrating on 80, et cetera, and just kind of diving in on the deep end on a single port is not super wise. Really what you want to do is just kind of generally interrogate each port for 5, maybe 10 minutes at most. And at the end of that, you'll be able to just have a better idea of what the box is actually doing, what vectors might be more likely than others, right? But regardless, I want to probably run some, commands in the background because I don't want to wait all day for these commands to run. And so generally speaking, I like to start with 2. Auto recon is probably the first one. And so I've already run that here, but basically what that would look like is this. Auto recon, it's a super cool tool by Tiberius. Shout out to him. He created it. And basically, it's a whole slew of tools that run automagically. And that's the beautiful thing about auto recon is once you have this, let's see here, and then scans, it has a lot of different things you can run. And so if it finds something that might be juicy, let's say SSH or FTP, that you're really kind of curious about how to run a proper brute force attack or how to run, Hydra can be so annoying sometimes because it's just, all these flags and you have to, set up your packets the right way. Well, it has a manual commands, text here, and you can brute force logins with 22, right? So it gives you, all right, this is where it's going to save. This is what, generally speaking, what could happen here. Or if you find a username, you can put that in. So it kind of gives you the tools, to be able to start your pen test in a more effective way. Very, very, very handy tool. I use it on every single CTF and every single box that I'm getting into because typically, I'm fortunate to say, but it finds stuff that I just wasn't looking for or maybe wasn't seeing initially. Another thing that's beautiful about this is kind of a handy little trick, is when you're ever in a folder, you can always type or always start a HTTP server in that folder. And then when I go here to 127.0.0.1, I can start manually looking through that area, right? So that doesn't have anything, but then it kind of keeps track, right? Because I think that's the one downfall of auto recon, is it gives you all the good information, and maybe some of it's not as important, right? So anyways, you can go through here and SSH and map.txt, and then you can look at, okay, what did it find in SSH, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of a handy little trick here that I like to use. Okay, so we've got our notes, we've got our ports, we've got auto recon running in the background. Now, what do we do next? Just interrogate each port equally for about 5 to 10 minutes and try and understand it. So, you would SSH and say, whatever. You can start a brute force. You could try different, root at, you don't know what's gonna work. You could do a lot of, searches. So you're looking through these in-map versions for SSH would be this, and so you're going out to Google, et cetera, et cetera. SSH isn't always the best vector, to be honest, to start with, though. So you don't always have to go 2280, 443, and just on down the line. You can start with what's most likely. And so 80 is probably a lot more likely, and probably where they actually want us to go. So let's go there. What was it? 10.10. So we're here. And the first thing we see is that it's stock, right? So, we're pretty familiar with this, proudly powered by WordPress. That confirms our scan earlier. So if we go back into HTTP, it's got WordPress 5.8.1. So that's our version. Apache would also be our version, right? So you can look for standard Apache and various folders within that space. All good things to jot down, right? So you're building your notes section. You're saying, okay, this is what this looks like. Backdoor. Something that you might find as well is when you go in here, you'll eventually find, I can't remember exactly where it is, but basically, if you do proper enumeration through this, you're going to find backdoor.htb, which is the actual site here. And so it's always wise to basically edit your Etsy host, because for whatever reason, and there is definitely a reason, but I'm just not going to get deep into it, the host file and the IP to DNS mapping will kind of reveal maybe another layer that you're not seeing. I've noticed this with a few CTFs, and so it's just really important to be able to do that. So you're going to go Etsy hosts here. Okay, so you're in Etsy hosts, and you've got 10.10.11.125 backdoor.htb, and so just make sure that that's in your Etsy host file. Super smart to do. It might change something, it might not, right? But now when you're doing your web enumeration, it's just a little bit cleaner. Okay, so you poked around there. Next thing you want to do, again, so here's the temptation, right? Is to, what's this? What's this? I'm going to start doing a directory bus. Where can I poke around? Where can I do this? And that's fine if you're, pretty experienced and kind of know what you're looking for. WordPress, you might know about it, WP admin or something else. So that is great. If you're able to, dive right in on the deep end and know where you're going, that's fine. But I personally don't like to pursue things that way, because what if 1337 is the actual vector, right? So what if I can netcat to it and it just brings me right on and it says, hey, type this for user.txt flag. And it's like, oh, okay. Like this is obviously where I'm supposed to go, right? So that's why I say, don't 10.125, if I'm going to netcat into this, don't just start going crazy on a certain port. Be really methodical and really tenacious about how you're, and strategic basically about how you're putting in those notes in. I digress, though. the truth is that netcat, telnet, all those good things are not going to work on 1337 right away. And so basically that is a dead end as well. So what's next? You've got your auto recon scan running in the background. Maybe you can go back to 80. So 22, you've kind of marked off netcat on 1337, and you've interrogated the port enough to assume that that's probably not the vector. And so next, what you're probably going to want to do is a directory bust. There's a lot of really great tools for directory busting. So GoBuster's an awesome one. It's kind of got a fun little GUI that you can use. I like to use dir search personally. And so let's get out of this actually. And back in the backdoor, too high. And then go to web. Got some things that I've tried there. But basically what this is going to share with you, this command, which again is on that walkthrough, basically goes to a recursion depth 4 on backdoor.htp and saves it out. And so what that recursion depth does is basically say, okay, I'm going to WP admin and then some, and it's going to keep driving down. It uses common.txt, so that might not be the most robust of frameworks, but it can be really, really handy. If you're willing to look at that. And so regardless, forgot kind of what I'm saying here, but basically, you want to drive value there by understanding the port at its entirety. So what this is doing, again, is, kind of interrogating all of these recursion statuses. And it is only finding the 200 to 399, and it's avoiding certain basically replies, and it's giving the pen tester a really good view as to how deep the rabbit hole goes. And so while this is running, I'm going to pause it and I'll catch you back after this is done. So I realized I did a really bad job of explaining what this is actually doing, so I apologize. Basically, what this is doing is going to 4 depths of recursion upon a directory. So it's a little easier to see with this. So, it's going to WP includes, and then it's going back through common.txt and saying, okay, RSS function exists. And then if RSS function exists, and this is another directory, let's say, then it would go back through and go to common.txt again. So that's all it's really doing. The beautiful thing about dir search that I like better than others is that it will give you again those kind of subdirectories, and so you kind of can see in a way how this is supposed to play out, and that's why I like it for what its purpose is, because that's what you're trying to do with directories is, okay, point your focus, right? So WP admin images, WP includes. You don't want to just go WP admin blah 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 blah, right? And just kind of going through that. And so the first thing I like to do whenever I get a directory bust is, again, pop open my notes and then think through, okay, what are the things that stand out? So WP admin, obviously, WP config, that's a big one. Login. You might even go on to a, Google what, interesting directories are for WordPress. So what are the juiciest ones out of all of them? And so if I go into, I like hack tricks a lot. If I go into hack tricks WordPress, I believe this is Carlos Pollup. He's the same guy that made LinPeas and WinPeas. But basically, if you go in here, he's saying main WordPress files, right? So license.txt, and it tells you what it is. So just finding a little, something that says, hey, this is where you should, put your focus will be will save you a lot of time, basically. Going back into this, I think the 3 main ones that stood out to me were WP content, WP admin, and WP includes. And so, if we go into these various directories, mainly focusing on the 200s, pardon me, we'll see that, there's a lot of, useful things to glean from. So WP admin, obviously, if we go in here into WP admin, that's a really great place to start. Do you have admin access? Can you brute force? Um, can you brute force the front end? Oh boy, it's going to be like that. And then there might be a login or something like that. So WP admin, maintenance, upgrade, images. So, so here's something that was a rabbit trail for me. And initially, what I tried. So admin, I believe, is the WordPress default. But it says that the password you entered for the username admin is incorrect. Now, if I do something like backdoor, and it'll actually say is not registered on the site, right? So backdoor is not registered, which means that admin is, right? So that's, something to look out for. Again, if I were to fill this out, look at all of these different things, I might spend 15 or 20 minutes just brute forcing this, or, running a brute force on Intruder, Burp Suite, or whatever, and trying to brute force the front end or run Hydra or something like that, and then come back to it and see if anything happened, right? So the point is, again, with the notes, with the spreadsheets and everything else, is to keep your focus on what is actually possible. And if you get stuck, you just keep moving forward, right? So I would brute force that, and then instead of thinking, oh, it's got to be, I just didn't try it the right way. Spend 15, again, 20 minutes maybe doing it, and then if it's not the vector, just move on. So just move on. And so if you go into WP content, same thing. You're going to find some useful information, and then I'm sorry, it's going to go into. Let's see, I think. I believe this is where I wanted to be. Let me double check here. Yeah, so if you go into WP content and plugins, which was a subdirectory in dir search, so you got plugins here. Again, so all the 200s, just methodically start working through them, what's there, what's not, and everything like that. We find this really great plugin called ebook download. Now, think about plugins as like apps on your phone. Basically, it has a single purpose, or maybe even has multiple purposes. But if you put it on here and forget about it, or if it has one utility or something like that, then maybe it's not secure, right? So if I, using the app on your phone analogy, if I have downloaded an app for a conference that I went to or whatever, and then come back 2 years later and realize that it's still on my phone, that's kind of what this is suggesting is, hey, we've got this plugin, and we put it on here for a specific purpose. Maybe we forgot about it, or maybe it's insecure and we knew that it was insecure, but we needed it for this one thing, and then we just left it on here. And so that's kind of what it's suggesting. Regardless, if you pop into ebook downloads, we see a bunch of different files. We can go into the README, and what it's telling us is that it's version 1.1. So if I just type in ebook reader exploit, it's going to give us a exploit, maybe even WordPress. So if I type that in, we've got version 1.1 directory traversal. Obviously, it's purple, so we've been here before. I've been here before. And so, that's basically what it's suggesting, right? So now as I kind of dig into this, I want to kind of, again, instead of, oh, what's this, blah, 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 and just start digging in, I want to make solid notes. And so I say, okay, I went here, I did this, this is where I'm at. I'm kind of done with the looking into all these directories for now. I want to start focusing on directory traversal, right? And so things to try, I've put all those 200s in here, and now I'm digging into, okay, so we've got ebook reader 1.1, exploit, and then copy this, right? And so that way I lose my connection. My wife calls me for dinner, whatever that may be. We can just come back to this and we can say, okay, this is where this is where it's at. I can just kind of pick it up right where I left off. That's what's always been best for me, and I just suggest it again. So if I pop in an ebook reader, I look at this, it's kind of suggesting, hey, this works on XAMPP, so maybe it won't work. Who knows? And so what I can do, I can kind of do two different things. So what I actually prefer to do is pop into Burp Suite, and so I'm just going to turn on Foxy Proxy. Foxy Proxy is basically just a plugin that you can add to Firefox, and it allows you to intercept web requests on 8080. If you just type in Foxy Proxy burp setup, you'll have a very easy way to set that up. But regardless, before I do that, I'm going to turn intercept on. I'm going to pop back into my website here, and then I am going to, I think I'll just start by doing this. Okay, so I've got WP config. So I apologize about that. I was trying to set it up with Intruder, but because of some proxy settings, it just wasn't working. Basically what I had to do was, I can just hit refresh on this and it will seek this page, and it'll pop into my proxy, and then I'm going to take that exploit and I'm going to plug it in. So WP content, WP config. I might even send it to repeater. So I'm going to send this over to repeater, and it's my first time doing it this way, but it seems like a more logical approach anyways. And so what this will give me is that WP config.php, file, instead of downloading it every time, which is what it will do if you just plug it straight into the URL. So that's why I'm doing it this way. You've got a few kind of juicy details. You got WordPress user, you've got a, MySQL here. It is running on localhost, so that can be a red flag. That was to me when I was first looking at it, like, hey, maybe this isn't the vector, but you can try, make a note of this, try it on SSH, try it on, 443, or I'm sorry, 1337, and see if, you can enter that username and password or something like that. So that's definitely a possibility. The big other aspect of this, so you now have a directory traversal vulnerability. This confirms that, right? So you are able to say, I can successfully read files on the remote system. Great. Okay, that's definitely a positive step in the right direction. There are probably a few things when you're looking at a box initially that you just want to dive into right away. Etsy Shadow is a great one. Log files, you can look at processes, you can look at a lot of different things, right? So the first thing I will look into is Etsy Shadow. Let's start with Etsy password, because password. So you've got directory traversal here. Obviously, all of this looks pretty stock. MySQL, Nats, not seeing a root here, but that could be on there too. But the one that stands out the most is this, you've got 1,000, so that should be a red flag, and then user. So I know this is kind of hard because you have to kind of look at what a real Etsy password file looks like. So you can look at your own maybe, but user is the username. And we know that because it has 1,000, and because it's kind of resting in this space. So I know that's kind of annoying to look at, but that's what they named it. So now you've got Etsy password. We can look at Etsy Shadow. We might not have access to that. You do need root privileges to do that. And so we can try that again. So we don't have rights there. Another thing, though, that is pretty common, and so this vector is definitely one that you have to kind of dig into a little bit more, especially if you're only doing this completely green for the first time and really don't know where else to go. This isn't a great box to start on. I think probably a lot of people would want hints here, simply because, the proc PID command line kind of methodology to see processes is pretty vague and pretty difficult to, again, start with. So if we go to proc, got nothing here, and then we go to one, and then command line, basically all this is saying is that it is running ubiquity no prompt for that. And so I know, again, that sounds really, really vague. So this is a process that's running on process one. And the way that we can know that is because if we, just Google search, how to find processes in Linux, you might burp off first. We're probably going to see you got PS top. So, and then you can even say where are they stored. So the proc directory, if we look at our own proc even, so if we, pop in here and just say cat proc, we've got all these different processes here, right? And then if we pop into one, let's say, and we see what is possible here, this command line is going to output that information for us. And so my process one is running sbin in its splash. And then if I type in psaux, a lot of different processes here, but the first one should be sbin init splash. So that's basically what we're going to do is we're going to use the proc 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, and command line to spit out what we want to see. We want to see the processes that are running on the remote system, right? And so again, no shame at all if you didn't know how to do that initially. That was definitely something I was like, whoa, like this is, an easy box, and this is probably the hardest part for sure, is thinking through that methodology and then setting it up. And if you got it the first time and everybody's hunky-dory, then good for you. You're a great pen tester. So just spoke through, why this is sbin in its splash, and what this process actually means within proc. Really, the idea now is kind of one of two things, but basically what you want to do, right, is brute force all of those processes, 1 through 1,000, 1 through 10,000, whatever it may be, and determine what processes are running on that concurrent space. So if I do, proc 2 command line, it'll show me what's running on proc 2, et cetera, right? So idea being that you have all of these processes listed within this command. There's kind of two ways to do it. So you have your repeater tab, proc 2, proc 3, etc. You can send this to intruder. Okay. And what you can do is clear it, highlight this. So I can do that for you. Clear it and just highlight this, add it, and then go into payloads. And then what you're going to do is print maybe 1 to 1,000, 1 to 10,000, whatever it may be. And we can even look at our own processes and see kind of what is active on here. So yeah, you've got 23, 5K, all of that good stuff. So might be useful. And what I did was I just built a Python script. That's just me testing it right there. But if we cat print.py, again, this should be in the walkthrough that I link below. But you're basically just going to write a Python script to print 1 through 1,000. You can change this to 10,000, whatever suits you, and move into payloads and paste that, right? So if you just paste, I'll just show you an example. Again, I'm not going to do this because the problem with this method is it relies on, actually, I'll just paste here. So yeah, you have, you can just continue to paste all of those numbers. The problem with it is community version throttles requests. And that becomes a huge issue when you're trying to find 1,000 different variables within processes like this. Again, what you're trying to do is not overload your system, overload that system. And so instead of doing something like that, what we can do, seems like my Kali machine is starting to throttle here a little bit, so I apologize. What we can do, and admittedly, I pulled this from the Hack the Box walkthrough, but you can basically write this script again, should be in that walkthrough that I link below, and then run it. I just named it proc.py and run it, and what it's going to accomplish is the same thing basically, but it's going to give you a formatted string of what those variables are. So I encourage you, do it this way. It takes a lot less time and a lot less energy. Basically, at the end of this, though, you should have a standard set of processes that's on the remote machine. So, looking through this, it's probably wise, again, to Google everything that you see here with the intent that you're looking for some way to get a reverse shell. So thinking about this logically, again, we're starting from square one and taking notes, making sure that we're finding every single bit of information that we can through enumeration. And then we're taking this information, we're dumping it into our notes and saying, okay, what is this? What is this cronf? What is, rs log d or rsys log d? And continuing on here and just moving through all of these in a methodical way. So it might take you a little bit of time. There's a few that stand out though, and that should be sort of red flags initially. And those are, anything with root in it, it just kind of says, hey, look here, because it could be a priv-asc vector or it could be just an automatic root. And then you have a home user, which again, this is our user, right? It's not just any user, it's who we know it to be. It's running on 1337 and it's running GB server, whatever that may be. And so, moving again through one, so on and so forth, you're eventually going to get here. Follow the methodology correctly, you should be able to just Google this. Just going to move this and just type in exploit. See what happens. Okay. So you find out that there's a GNU server exploit. Hacktricks agrees, GDB server. So all good signs. I will hint at something here as well. So you'll notice that in my notes, when I looked up, when I create a new port, I initially give 3 different sort of endings. So you Google it and you can type in GitHub version, and then I should add here really exploit DB. And because whenever you see exploit DB, it should kind of be a red flag, because exploit DB is run by OffSec, I believe, And typically a GitHub created exploit as well is, obviously you want to read through it, do due diligence, etc. But by reading through the entire exploit, you should get a good handle on, okay, this is where this is from, this is what it's supposed to do, and how it's supposed to give me this reverse shell. So just want to kind of speak to that as well, because anytime you see exploit DB, it should just give you a little ding ding ding, and allow you to look in that folder. So this is a Python script, obviously, and it's giving us the exact commands that we want to run. So you've got a GB server, and it's running on Elite port. It gives us what reverse shell we need and how to run that exploit. So this looks actually pretty good. And what I would probably do in this situation, if this weren't a walkthrough, is add it to the list and just continue enumeration, to be honest. So I would also look at this, the screen and root and all of that good stuff, because we don't know for sure that this is the right vector again. So again, this being a walkthrough, this is where we're going to go, but I just wanted to throw that in there, because you don't want to get stuck on a single entity, a single pathway. So let's trick on down here. What I'm going to do now is move into my exploit. And as you can see, I've already run this and attempted and failed with rev.bin. Okay, so it gives us all of these different commands. So you can just run msfvenom, lhost, lport, and we can go ahead and do that. But I just wanted to say that rev.bin did not work for me. And because rev didn't work for me, I tried elf and it did. And so another thing to think about is all of the various payloads that you're going to utilize. So got msfvenom. Let's see here. What is my IP? There we go. Linux, we're guessing that it's a 64-bit box. We could probably do a little bit more enumeration and find that information out. But regardless, we find that out. We can do various other payloads if those don't work as well. So again, wise to just take notes, make sure that you're running those payloads in a consistent way. So I've got that. Because my IP hasn't changed, it seems, I'm not going to make a new one. So go ahead and run that. It'll give you the new shell, and then I just copied that exploit into exploit.py. And so it says, hey, run netcat, and you should get a reverse shell with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's see what we got here. Man, fun stuff. My machine needs more RAM, it seems. Okay, so we are going to, I'm using Terminator, so I'm just going to open up a new tab here. I like to use RLWrap instead of just netcat, and I'll show you why. But basically what this is going to do is start on that port. I'm going to say python 3 exploit.py, and then you're going to run against the IP with the specified port, which is GB server that's running on 1337. We know that because it said in the port or in the process that it was running GB server. Okay, so if you're curious about that, that's where we got 1337. It should say o.o.o.o:1337, and then with our reverse shell. So by running that, we should pop a shell on the back end. Okay. So who am I? User. Great. So we have a reverse shell. Give yourself a pat on the back here. Another thing that's super wise initially when you are working through the next phase of enumeration on a remote machine, you always want to upgrade your shell. And the reason you want to do that is because you might not have a standard bin bash shell, or you might not have a shell at all. You might have something else entirely, or it might have dropped you into something that you're unaware of. And so by upgrading your shell and just standardizing across the board, you know that you are working with the right tools, you have the right commands in the right system. Sometimes, you'll drop into a shell and netcat won't work, but it will work in a regular shell because you're not in a shell initially at all. So just to standardize, know exactly where you're at, to know exactly what tools you should have and that you should be working with on the remote system, just go ahead and do that. So the command here is Python 3 instead of just Python, and then, import pty.spawn bin bash. So and if you're curious about which Python version, you can always say Python dash dash version, and then that way you know exactly what you're working with. All right, I just had to do a reboot. There was some strange things going on in the background, but essentially, like I said, run this command here, this Python 3-c, and import pty.spawn / bin bash, and that should give you a real shell. And we can start typing in who am I, ID, host name, all of that good stuff. And so, depending on what your privilege escalation methodology is, people call it privesc methodology, there is a lot of different aspects of a box that you can start with. Okay. But usually, and I say this usually, what I like to do is start with some script that helps me sort of narrow my path down, that runs cron jobs in the background, that runs, a bunch of different things in the background. And it should give me, generally speaking, a really good idea of what the box is, where to start looking, where not to start looking, etc. So a good, really, really great script. Again, Carlos Pollup from Hack Tricks. He created a script called linpeas and winpeas. So this is for Linux. So if you go out here and you can download linpeas, Carlos Pollup, and peas.sh, just look for that. Oh, and that is because I already have it, that it's doing that, but sort of embarrassing there. Carlos, what? I believe script. Yeah, so linpeas.sh, and super cool script. Shout out to him and the team there. And Peas will give you a lot of different, um, you know, different, you got Mac and WinPeas and Linux and ARM and all of that great stuff. So go get your LinPeas, go download it. I have mine in I believe it's a privesc folder, not transfer. And if I go into scripts here, see it, linpeas.sh. So you just do Python -3-m on 80, and then pop in a temp. The reason a lot of people start with temp is because if I go back my ls-la and see who owns temp, you'll see that root owns it, but everybody can read and write into it. And so that's typically why people start with temp and move things in a temp. Another reason is because it's not basically, if the machine restarts, it should cache out that from temp. And so you'll notice even as I go into temp, what we should see here are some basically services that started this box initially. And when this restarts, it should, you know, lose these files from the temp folder. So little food for thought there. So I've started my script already, my server already. And so I'm just going to use, we can say which wget just to make sure we have it. So wget and then HTTP because it's on port 80 and mine address there. And then I'm just going to say linpeas.sh. And when we get this, it should just dump into our folder here. So the other thing you always want to do is make sure that you can execute on it. So let me just show you real quick. But basically, you can't execute on it right now. It's just at a read level. And so if I chmod plus x peas.sh, then run it, so just ./linpeas.sh, it'll start. I'll just max this out because I don't need it. I need the other one right now. And it should run in the background and give us kind of a generalized vector and path. So as you see here, you've got 95% privilege escalation vector. Not always accurate, I'll be honest. That hasn't been my personal experience. 95% of the time, this is telling me that this is 95% right. Probably not, but I'm obviously going to take note of it and try a few things. So one of the things it also found was that screen process that we found initially, right? So run bin /sh, so run a shell, and then while it's true, find this screen command, and if it's empty, execute screen root, DMS root, which are a couple flags with the screen command. And it's finding this, and so that looks very promising. I'll just lead us down the path initially, but that is actually going to be our vector. But I want to just take a moment here to show that, wow, look how amazing all of this output is. And this is showing us, what to try and maybe even more importantly, what not to try. Because privilege escalation, if you think about it, could be anything. And so the goal here is not necessarily to find out everything about the box, but some generalized things. Another thing that I wanted to show you as well is I generally, because I use Notion, I'm able to sort of have a privesc methodology kind of built into my notes. And so you'll notice that Python command, I'm getting linpeas and linenum right away. And then I kind of generalize. So, suid, getting familiar with the machine. I've got all of these commands. So all I do, obviously I have two screens here, but I can't do that with this. And so I would just pull that down at stat, and it would, give me these kind of privilege escalation vectors. And so it's pretty copy paste for myself. And generally speaking, about 80% of the time I'm able to, go down the right vector because I've done proper enumeration. I've kind of taken note of all of the commands that I need to run in general. And so again, if you want this template and you use Notion already, highly recommend it. So something like this should show us the user that's not in Etsy password, for instance. So no login false. It's going to give us, generally speaking, users to concentrate on because these are users that aren't in the initial setup or, your SSHD and all of that. Moreover, one of the things I really love that is a common vector amongst a lot of privesks that I've noticed is you look for the suid type or the suid flag or the suid set. And basically what that is telling you is not just, what you can run, But basically what suid is a sticky bit on the file permissions. And so if there's a sticky bit on a file permission, it means it runs as the context of that user. And so what's really cool about that, so you would usually see an S right here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but the S runs as that root user. So again, if we run psaux, we look at that find command that was run earlier. Oh, goodness. Where did it go? My apologies here. But basically, well, that's actually not going to give it to us because... So let's look up here, actually. But we did see it. So this command right here is running screen, right? So if this is running screen, or if it has the ability to run the screen command from that, then we should be able to run screen at whatever file level it is, as opposed to whatever user level it is. So let me put that another way. I know that was super confusing. When I go into, let's go where that screen command is. So var run screen. I look at ls-la. I look at who owns this. It's root. And so I can't run this as this user. But if I go again back to that suid bit, I'm able to see that I can run screen as the root user. I hope that makes sense. So you're running not as user, but whoever owns the file. And if the file's owned by root and you can run screen as suid as that user, then you can get root. So let's try it. So this, you can try it a bunch of different ways, but I will save you a little bit of time and just say that you do need to export term and then xterm, and that's because you want this environmental variable set. So your terminal needs to be xterm. And what screen is doing, if you do a little bit of research, it's kind of like tmux. It's running another session as that user. And so what this is actually doing is giving us an sroot session. And because we can run it as root, it's going to drop us into the root shell. And so last but not least, let's just type in screen-x. And again, this is a bit expedited, but you would look at the flags. You would look at the help command. You would see kind of how to run that as that user in this environment. And when I run this, now we have root. So obviously we want to, cat out the root.txt flag. And if you cat that out, you'll be able to see that. So hope this was helpful. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about how to get into it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And would love to chat about how to improve your pen testing methodology. Cheers.